The title of this text is what immediately drew me to it. There's not many sequences of words that will have me lying awake at night ruminating over them, but this book did just that. I've been dealing with a physical health issue for about the past 6 years now. Over that time I've learned a lot about both my physical and mental well-being, which I continue to learn about. But it's a difficult reality to face when you come to the conclusion that specific traumatic events have been the cause of something that continues to be part of your day-to-day life after 6 years of trying various medications and treatments. It's something I didn't want to give into. I didn't want to admit that this life event has affected me on a wholly biological level. It felt like it would give this experience more psychological hold over me, a confirmation of how powerless I'd been made feel over my own reality. However, I was wrong about this. It's in beginning to face what I learned to is referred to as trauma that I gradually reclaimed my existence. I never imagined art theory or any particular theory would become a form of empowerment for me. It's been uncomfortable, hard-hitting, sometimes gut-wrenching. But that's nothing compared to what has drawn me to the topic. I'm going to focus in on some short sections from chapters 1 to 3 of The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel Van der Kolk. Each of these sections have been chosen for the poignancy I felt while reading them. I've chosen to do this to give some insight into the phenomenological experience that strongly directs my practice, but is such a wordless state, and which Van der Kolk gives the reason for in this text. It would be difficult to go into further detail on their personal resonance, but I feel that overall they highlight some incredibly important factors that speak about the traumatized mind and communicate directly what I cannot. It is this very state that's become my muse and motivation. So many sections or quotes hold very dear to me in my practice. I've decided to also show a painting that I made while listening to the audiobook of this text. I found this experience quite emotionally draining but also cathartic and inspirational. I've selected a few other pieces which also have been made with the text at the forefront of my thoughts. These segments are both fascinating and grueling to face, despite being just another medical book on trauma. Van der Kolk has a way of writing so plainly about trauma that the book becomes an experiential read. Something about the hard, cold-hitting medical facts evokes feelings of discomfort and upset within me, as though I'm being exposed or seen through so clearly. Although the author does not become a resentful character in their analysis, often adding in how they empathised with their fellow students/clients while working as a research assistant at Harvard, the reader is taken on a journey with the author and his clients, and I hope to evoke something to that effect while striving to communicate an empathic understanding of trauma. Traumatised people look at the world in a fundamentally different way to other people. Somehow the very event that caused them so much pain had become their sole source of meaning. They felt truly alive only when they were revisiting their traumatic past, overwhelmed by horror and helplessness. Overwhelming experiences affect our innermost sensations and our relationship to our physical reality, the core of who we are. We have learned that trauma is not just an event that took place sometime in the past, it is also the imprint left by that experience on the mind, brain and body. This imprint has ongoing consequences for how the human organism manages to survive in the present. Trauma results in a fundamental reorganization of the way the mind and brain manage perceptions. It changes not only what we think and what we think about, but also our very capacity to think. The automatic physical and hormonal responses of bodies that remain hypervigilant, prepared to be assaulted or violated at any time. For real change to take place, the body needs to learn that the danger has passed and to live in the reality of the present. How upsetting it was to be suddenly hijacked by images, feelings and sounds from the past. Our most surprising finding was a white spot in the left frontal lobe of the cortex, in a region called Broca's area. In this case, the change in colour meant that there was a significant decrease in that part of the brain. Broca's area is one of the speech centres of the brain, which is often affected in stroke patients when the blood supply to that region is cut off. Without a functioning Broca's area, you cannot put your thoughts and feelings into words. Our scans showed that Broca's area went offline whenever a flashback was triggered. In other words, we have visual proof that the effects of trauma are not necessarily different from and can overlap with the effects of physical lesions like strokes. All trauma is proverbial. Shakespeare captures a state of speechless terror in Macbeth after the murdered king's body is discovered. "O horror, horror, horror! Tongue or heart cannot conceive nor name thee. Confusion thou hath made its masterpiece." Under extreme conditions, people may scream obscenities, call for their mothers, howl in terror, or simply shut down. Victims of assaults and accidents sit mute in emergency rooms. Traumatized children lose their tongues and refuse to speak. Photographs of combat soldiers show hollow-eyed men staring mutely into a void. Even years later, traumatized people often have enormous difficulty telling other people what has happened to them. Their bodies experience terror, rage, and helplessness, as well as the impulse to fight or flee, but these feelings are almost impossible to articulate. Trauma by nature drives us to the edge of comprehension, cutting us off from language based on common experience or an imaginable past. When words fail, haunting images capture the experience and return as nightmares and flashbacks. In contrast to the deactivation of Broca's area, another region, Brodmann's area 19, lit up in our participants. This is a region in the visual cortex that registers images when they first enter the brain. We were surprised to see brain activation in this area so long after the original trauma. Under ordinary conditions, raw images registered in Area 19 are rapidly diffused to other brain areas that interpret the meaning of what has been seen. Once again, we are witnessing a brain area rekindled as if the trauma were actually occurring. The scans also reveal that during flashbacks our subjects' brains lit up only on the right side. Today there is a huge body of scientific and popular literature about the difference between the right and left brains. Back in the early 90s, I'd heard some people had begun to divide the world between left-brainers, meaning rational, logical people, and right-brainers, the intuitive, artistic ones. But I hadn't paid much attention to this idea. However, our scans clearly showed that images of past trauma activate the right hemisphere of the brain and deactivate the left. We now know that the two halves of the brain do speak different languages. The right is intuitive, emotional, visual, spatial, and tactual, and the left is linguistic, sequential, and analytical. While the left half of the brain does all the talking, the right half carries the music of experience. Under ordinary circumstances, the two sides of the brain work together more or less smoothly, even in people who might be said to favour one side over the other. However, having one side or the other shut down even temporarily, or having one side cut off entirely, as sometimes happened in early brain surgery, is disabling. Deactivation of the left hemisphere has a direct impact on the capacity to organise experience into logical sequences and to translate our shifting feelings and perceptions into words. Broca's area, which blanks out during flashbacks, is on the left side. Without sequencing, we can't identify cause and effect, grasp the long-term effects of our actions, or create coherent plans for the future. People who are very upset sometimes say they're losing their minds. In technical terms, they're experiencing the loss of executive functioning. When sometimes reminding a traumatized person of their past, their right brain reacts as if the traumatic event were happening in the present. But because their left brain is not working very well, they may not be aware that they are re-experiencing and reenacting the past. They are just furious, terrified, enraged, ashamed, or frozen. Adrenaline is one of the hormones that are critical to help us fight or flee in the face of danger. Under normal conditions, people react to a threat with a temporary increase in their stress hormones. As soon as the threat is over, the hormones dissipate and the body returns to normal. The stress hormones of traumatized people, in contrast, take much longer to return to baseline and spike quickly and disproportionately in response to mildly stressful stimuli. This text has affected me like no other. It's had a huge impact on my understanding of how deep trauma goes within the body and mind. It indulges in my curiosity around how trauma held as tension in the body translates viscerally to paint. Can this be sensed by the viewer? How does process communicate? Van der Kolk has answered personal questions that haunt me and has enriched my understanding of why I continue to make artwork that lies within the realms of deep discomfort for both myself and those who connect with it.